Hi everybody, Craig Peterson back here. I don't know if you guys know what Airbnb's roots were. It started out as a air bed and breakfast. It really was intended for the very young generation to be able to go to concerts and things and just get an air bed in somebody's apartment or home. That's what Airbnb is all about, air bed and breakfast. That was the whole idea. And I'm not so sure they've come a long way from those days. I spent the last few segments, in fact, talking about my own personal horror stories. We've been trying to use Airbnb. There's another one I did not mention in Florida, which was not a horror story, but was quite the disappointment for this house that I think, well, I'm quite confident this house that we rented, this was for a family reunion. So we rented this house that slept like a dozen or something like that. And all of the beds were just terrible. You know, the cheapest mattresses known to man. You shift your weight at all and the squeak's loud enough to wake you up. The sheets were the cheapest ones you could possibly imagine. This was an Airbnb as well. And it was pretty obvious that this place was set up for porn videos. You go into the garage, and the whole garage is one massive shower with, I can't remember, 4 or 6 shower heads in it. And then a little bit of workout equipment. I mean, very, very little bit of workout equipment. It was astoundingly bad, okay? And so there you go. There's all of the Airbnb and VRBO experiences I can remember. And that one was rented, the one in Florida, by my sister for the family. She did not stay there. She actually stayed with my mom, and it was really quite revealing, frankly. So disappointing. Now, this all came about, I never told you these stories before, but because of a story that was in Vice.com, and you'll find this up on my website at craigpeterson.com. They put a little note out saying, hey, does anybody have any stories about Airbnb scams? And they said, this is Anna Marion who wrote this, that nearly 1,000 people sent them emails with their stories. And so they looked at all of the stories, they put together some patterns, and apparently this former Vice senior staff writer by the name of Ali Conti shared her story of a disastrous vacation to Chicago, and she ran into what she's saying are a bunch of grifters and frankly a nationwide scam. I no longer use Airbnb at all or VRBO at all. I have been sticking with hotels, and if you're interested, I typically use Hotwire. And I don't use the star ratings of the hotels. I use the ratings that are posted by the people who stayed there. I think that's the best feature of Hotwire because, frankly, I don't care what hotel I stay at. I just want to stay at a decent hotel. And I even used Hotwire throughout France and Belgium. It worked great. We found some just wonderful spots that we never would have found if we were just looking to stay at the Marriott or the Hilton or whatever it is, right? So Conti's investigation revealed that really some serious problems with Airbnb. Now, you might have heard about this problem with Airbnb because it really hit the news late last year of these party rentals. Because somebody was killed, I think it was in San Diego, at one of these party rentals. So somebody rented a really nice house, and essentially a lot of these places get destroyed by the partiers, right? There's drugs there, there's heavy drinking, and in this one case that hit the news, there were gun shootings, okay? That's a very, very bad thing. So Conti apparently, and again, you can find this article on Vice.com, traced her own scam back to a company that used fake profiles and fake reviews to conceal a whole bunch of wrongdoings. And let's get into this, okay? Because property switches are probably one of the biggest ones. We'll tell you what those are. Units with sawdust on the floor, with holes in the walls. This whole bait and switch game, which goes into these property switches and stuff. It's really bad. When all else fails, there's these clumsy, threatening demands for 5-star reviews to hide the evidence of what they've done. Sometimes there's multiple scams that are being done. You know, the hackers aren't just coming after directly our money by trying to hack our businesses, by trying to fool us into clicking on links or doing things that we shouldn't be doing, right? These scammers are all over the place. So after the story that came out, Airbnb promised to, quote, verify all 7 million listings on the site by December of this year, 2020. And frankly, there's no way that they could really do this. There's no way you could send investigators to all 7 million listings. And he said, well, we're going to have to take more responsibility for stuff on our platform. Yes, you will. You have to provide a firewall, not just a firewall of, hey, the reviewers, the people who stay there and review can't see the reviews that come in from the owners of these properties, because that's not going to solve the problem. You need to make it so that there can't be retribution by the bad guys that are really giving Airbnb a bad name. Now, I got to mention that my sister, the one that booked that Airbnb for us in Florida, my sister has a house that she rents out in Park City, Utah on Airbnb. And one of her daughters keeps it clean. And I know my sister is not engaged in scams. And I know that my niece is somebody who takes responsibility for things. And I'm sure she keeps it clean. So I don't want to paint the whole Airbnb website and people who are renting with a black brush here. I don't want to paint the whole rental market, including VRBO, with a black brush. But I've got to say, 100% of the time, I have had what I think are scams on both platforms. Now, that's my personal opinion based on a handful of stays. And I know a handful of stays do not represent every listing on the platforms, right? I understand that. But the verification process we're talking about here, I don't know that he's ever going to do it. How are you going to review all 7, verify, not just review, verify all 7 million listings on the Airbnb site within 12 months by December 2020? I don't know how you're going to do it. So let's go through the biggest scams according to Vice.com. Number 1, which they say is exceedingly common. It's across hundreds of emails. It's the bait and switch, where Airbnb users were promised one apartment and arrived to find something very different. Deceptive photos that bore no resemblance to what they found when they got there. And my kids have found this too. They rented some places in Italy when they did a tour, and black mold everywhere, just terrible. Okay. Other times people were persuaded by the host to switch apartments or houses entirely. This is a very common thing where they say, hey, due to unforeseen circumstances, like a pipe broke, I'm going to have to move you to another one of our properties. Now, under the rules for Airbnb, the owner does not get penalized if they move you to a property due to, quote, unforeseen circumstances, unquote, like a pipe break. But it turns out some of these people are using that unforeseen circumstance again and again and again. And they're showing up to their rental to find that the new location's filthy, unfurnished, or in a totally different part of town. And they're saying that in a surprising number of stories, The new house was full of a weird number of beds laid out in bizarre configurations. Kind of sounds like that porn place that my sister rented for the family in Florida, doesn't it? So here's one of the quotes. I rented a place near Glass Beach on a few weeks prior to my trip. When I reached out to confirm the booking, the lister told me she had a septic problem in the unit, and she would see if she could put her up in a larger place nearby. It never materialized, but she refused to cancel my booking, saying the first time that her computer wasn't working, and the next time, weeks later, that her father just passed away. I had to complain to Airbnb that she refused to cancel the booking, so they canceled it, but I was unable to write a negative review. According to Vice again, they're saying the plumbing scam seems to rest on the idea Airbnb is uninhabitable. Hosts can't be penalized. Okay, that's what I was saying. I've seen this before. So this goes on, this whole bait and switch thing. Okay, next one, getting the guest to agree to move houses. And the plumbing scam is often kind of segueing into getting you to agree to move houses, okay? So they will say, it's supposed to be this, here's this complaint. It's supposed to be a quaint, quiet property in downtown. They're delayed by the homeowner stating that we'd need to change properties at the last minute. Since it was only a quick 2-night visit, we weren't opposed. The new, quote, larger location was a scummy little apartment complex on the other side of town. Next one, booking the Airbnb to multiple people at the same time. That's what happened to us in Vegas when my wife and I showed up at this apartment through Airbnb. Perhaps the most socially awkward bait and switch is this one, renting an Airbnb where you believe you've booked the whole residence only to arrive and find a whole bunch of strangers there. And that happened to us in Vegas. Multiple people told us they arrived to find other Airbnb guests at the house, or in some cases, people who seemed to live there. It just goes on and on. Next one, money scams, paying outside the app. And I mentioned this one early. It's a straightforward scam. So be careful of that. There's no reason to do that. Fake damages. And man, I've heard about this from multiple people before, my listeners. How can Airbnb really police this? Did the guests really damage the place? Okay. Oh man, scams. You'll find more about this online. My advice, use a hotel you trust, use a hotel booking site you trust. And I already told you, I use Hotwire because I don't care what the brand is. I just want a good hotel, and I use the ratings from the people who stayed there. Stick around, we'll be right back.